My name is John. I was a big guy, tipping the scales at 325 pounds, and Emily, my wife, had watched friends of hers drop dead from heart attacks. Naturally, she started worrying about my health too. So, in her wisdom, she decided to limit our bedroom activities to just 4 times a year, but only if I hit certain weight loss goals. These occasions were predictable: Valentine's Day, our anniversary, and both our birthdays. No surprise there. Over the course of 2 years, I managed to lose a whopping 118 pounds, getting down to about 207. But honestly, I was thinking about throwing in the towel. The whole process had been grueling. When I finally told Emily that I was done, her response hit me like a brick. She flat out refused to accept it. That's when she delivered the threat that became the turning point for this whole mess. "If you quit now," she said, stone cold, "we're sticking to 4 times a year, no exceptions. And if that's not enough for me, I'll find what I need somewhere else." That was the moment everything cracked. I just stared at her, stunned, wondering if I had really heard her right. The shock quickly turned to something worse as I saw the look in her eyes. She saw it too. First the hurt, then the anger rising in me. I couldn't believe what she was saying, that she'd use sex as a weapon, and even worse, dangle the possibility of cheating over my head. She knew she'd crossed a line, but it was too late. She had pushed me to lose all this weight for her, and now she was threatening to step out on me because I didn't want to keep going. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I laid it out for her, frustrated and angry. "Do you have any idea what I've put myself through? I did all of this for you, and this is how you repay me," dangling the idea of cheating on me like it's no big deal. I couldn't help but wonder how long she'd been thinking about stepping out. 2 years of hard work, and now she's throwing this at me? Our marriage, as far as I was concerned, was teetering on the edge. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Emily, realizing the damage she had caused, immediately backpedaled. She insisted that she never meant to actually cheat, but the trust was gone. I could see the panic in her eyes, but I wasn't buying it. I could barely stand to look at her as I got up from the kitchen table. I needed space to think, to clear my head. So I headed to the garage, leaving her sitting there in tears. Out in the garage, I needed to keep my hands busy, tinkering with whatever I could find. But my mind was racing. Did I really think she cheated on me over the last 2 years? I wanted to say no, but now I wasn't so sure. Before today, I wouldn't have doubted her for a second. But after what she said, I just didn't know anymore. And what about the future? Would she cheat on me later? The certainty I had earlier in the day was gone. I shook my head and said out loud, "I need to find out." When I finally walked back into the house, Emily was still at the kitchen table, her face blotchy and red from crying. I looked at her and, for a brief moment, I felt sorry for her. But that didn't change the fact that things couldn't go back to the way they were. I sat down and told her straight. I was done with the diet. From now on, we would stick to the 4 times a year rule she set, or maybe even less, depending on how I felt. I warned her, too. If she so much as thought about finding someone else, there would be consequences. And I wasn't talking about some civil conversation. I made it crystal clear. If you cheat, we're done. I'm not staying married to someone who'd betray me like that. I didn't hold back. I even called her a fancy woman, not exactly my proudest moment, but at that point, I didn't care. I told her I didn't trust her anymore, and that from now on, I'd be watching her closely. She'd better think twice before she did anything stupid. Then I stood up, told her I was heading out for a while, and said I'd be back for dinner. I suggested she order takeout if she wasn't up for cooking, then grabbed my keys and walked out the back door. A few moments later, I was in the car, pulling out of the garage, leaving her behind. As I drove away, I couldn't stop thinking, what just happened? How did I end up here? Meanwhile, Emily sat there at the kitchen table, sobbing her eyes out, muttering about how she had messed everything up. She kept saying to herself, why didn't I just keep my mouth shut? And she was right. If she had, we wouldn't be in this mess. An hour passed, and Emily eventually dragged herself to the bathroom, then collapsed on our bed, crying until she had no more tears left. By the time I got back later that afternoon, she hadn't moved. She was still lying there, in the same spot I'd left her. Like many men who suspect their wife of cheating, I decided to do some digging. I figured the easiest place to start was with our phone records. Both the home phone and Emily's cell were under my name, so it wouldn't be hard to get the logs. I hopped back in the car and headed to the phone provider's office, determined to find out the truth. When John visited the landline phone company, they offered to provide the call logs electronically. For a small fee, they loaded 3 years' worth of data onto a CD. He didn't hesitate to pay. It was worth every penny. Walking out with the CD in hand, John knew exactly why he wanted 3 years of data. He needed to look back before he'd started the diet, back to when Emily first began shutting him down, limiting their intimacy. He couldn't help but wonder if there had been some other motive behind her decision to cut him off. Next up was the cell phone company. They were a little more reluctant at first since the phone number he was asking about belonged to his wife. But John wasn't going to back down. After pointing out that it was a joint account in his name, they finally relented and agreed to give him the data. They charged $20 for it, which John thought was steep, but he paid up. It was a small price for peace of mind, though he made a mental note that he might switch providers in the future. By the time he got home, it was around 4 p.m., and Emily was lying on the bed, sound asleep. He decided to let her rest and went straight to the home office, locking the door behind him. He sat down at his computer and immediately began uploading the data from the 2 CDs into a folder he'd prepared in his documents. He had already figured out how he'd go about this. His plan was to start with the home phone logs from 2 years ago, right around the time Emily had restricted their intimacy and set those ridiculous weight loss milestones. He began with September 2008. That month alone had 96 calls to 19 different numbers. The phone company's format allowed him to sort the data easily, so he organized the calls by number, noting the dates, times, and call durations. It took him about an hour and a half to compile a detailed list of every single call made from their home phone over the last 2 years. He was just about to start on Emily's cell phone logs when he heard the office doorknob rattle. The door was locked, so no one could get in, but still, he saved all his work and quickly closed everything, hiding any sign of what he'd been doing. He logged off and walked over to open the door, only to find Emily standing there, looking like a complete wreck. Her hair was a tangled mess, her eyes swollen and red from all the crying, and she could barely meet his gaze. Every now and then, she'd steal a glance at him, only to drop her head again. Emily apologized, truly, deeply apologized, for all the hurt she had caused him. She admitted how selfish and cruel her actions had been, acknowledging that she had no right to interfere with his progress or control him the way she had. She pleaded with John to forgive her, saying that the decision to continue the diet should have been his alone. The remorse was clear in her voice, but John wasn't ready to just let it all go. He told her he forgave her, but he made it clear that his forgiveness was conditional, based on what he knew at that moment. He reminded her of everything he'd sacrificed over the last 2 years, all for her. He'd pushed himself, even given up intimacy, all to meet her expectations. But he was done now. He had hit his limit. Then he addressed the elephant in the room. "Look," he said, "there's a gorilla sitting right between us, and we need to deal with it. I need to know whether or not you've cheated on me. The not knowing, it's eating me alive." He laid out his terms for moving forward. If she hadn't cheated, and if she wasn't planning to cheat, then maybe, just maybe, they could work things out. But he needed her to understand that her reckless comment had shattered his trust. She had planted doubt in his mind, and now she'd have to live with the consequences until he could feel secure again. Emily, though, was hoping for an easier way out. She wanted him to forgive her on the spot, forget the whole mess, and move on like nothing had happened. But she could tell from the look in his eyes that wasn't going to happen. She felt the weight of her own actions pressing down on her, realizing that she had dug this hole for herself. In her mind, she thought, "I deserve this. I brought it on myself, but I just wish it would all go away." With a slow, resigned nod, she turned around and walked back to the bedroom, shutting the door behind her. She lay down again, not sobbing this time, but tears still ran down her face. A few minutes later, John opened the bedroom door and asked, "Emily, do you want something to eat?" She didn't even look up. "No, John, I'm not hungry," she said softly. John closed the door and headed out. He needed a break, and there was only one place he could think of, Grisham's, a local spot where he and Emily had shared drinks many times before. They had great food too. Tonight, he was going to let himself have what he really wanted: a couple of beers and a greasy bacon cheeseburger. He hadn't had more than 2 beers in a week for the past 2 years, and he couldn't even remember the last time he'd indulged in a burger. As he sat at Grisham's, nursing his drink and biting into the burger, he couldn't stop thinking about how his heart was breaking. He knew he'd never let himself get as out of shape as before, but tonight, he didn't care about diets or goals. He just wanted to feel something other than the pain Emily had left him with. After a while, he drove back home, straight to the office. He sat down at the computer again and got to work on the cell phone logs, determined to uncover the truth. Having already figured out the system from the landline calls, John quickly breezed through the cell phone list, finishing in half the time. After going through both lists, he realized that over the past 2 years, there had been 3,482 calls made in total, with 45 different numbers showing up on the logs. Out of curiosity, he decided to sort the calls by phone number, and what he discovered next sent a chill through his spine. As expected, there were close to 300 calls to his own cell phone, about 200 to his parents' number, and a similar amount to Emily's parents. There were also plenty of calls to Emily's sisters and about half that many to John's brother, John. Sprinkled in between were a few calls to friends whose numbers John recognized, along with some random calls to numbers he didn't know. But what really caught his attention were the 2 unfamiliar numbers that appeared way more than he'd anticipated. Over 200 calls to one, and more than 50 to another. Then, there were around 30 scattered calls to various other numbers, which John figured could be businesses like salons, stores, or church. Nothing unusual there. However, it was the 2 unrecognized numbers that kept gnawing at him. Being meticulous, John dug deeper, this time sorting the calls by day and time. When he did, the results were downright disturbing. Every Wednesday at exactly 10:55 a.m., Emily would call him on his cell, and within minutes, by 11:05 a.m., she would place a call to one of those unknown numbers. The pattern was flawless. Almost every single week, like clockwork. The few times the calls didn't happen were the weeks John had been on vacation. That realization made his blood boil. The coincidence was too perfect to ignore, and John knew something wasn't right. Determined to get to the bottom of it, he turned his attention to the second unfamiliar number. This one, he quickly noticed, had a pattern too, on Fridays. Once a month, on Friday afternoons, John would play golf with his brother and some buddies, finishing around 5:30 p.m. They'd usually stick around for a drink or two at the clubhouse before heading home, with John typically walking through the door by 6:30 p.m. Every time, Emily would call him right before he teed off, telling him she loved him and would be waiting for him when he got home. But now, John realized she was making another call shortly after that, to the second mystery number. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but John was horrified at what he was uncovering. He didn't have any hard evidence yet, but he knew in his gut that something was going on. What haunted him most was wondering how long it had been happening. Was this something new that started when Emily cut him off, or had she been doing this long before? He extended his search back another year, and the truth hit him like a sledgehammer. The calls had started 3 months before Emily began limiting their intimacy. It wasn't as frequent back then, but the signs were there. Whatever Emily had been up to, it had been going on for a while. Now, all John needed was to figure out who was on the other end of those calls. He ran a reverse lookup on the first number, but it came back as an unlisted cell phone. No luck there. The second number, though, was listed to a Alex Romano. John's heart sank. He knew exactly who Alex was, his personal trainer, the guy Emily had found for him at the gym. So, Emily had been calling Alex on those Fridays when John was out golfing. The realization stung like a slap in the face. John noted Alex's information in his call log spreadsheet, but he wasn't ready to confront Emily yet. Instead, he needed more time to process what he had just learned. He grabbed his keys and headed back to Grisham's for another drink, needing a moment to escape from the crushing weight of the situation. Sitting at the bar, John had a couple more beers, trying to steady his nerves. When the crowd started to thin after the dinner rush, he decided to take matters into his own hands. He spotted Kate, the attractive bartender he'd talked to before, and asked for her help. John explained the situation briefly, saying he needed her to make a call for him. Kate listened attentively, and John handed her the number he'd pulled from his log. "Call this number," he instructed her, "and ask for Alex. If it's him, tell him a woman gave you his number, saying he's a great trainer. See if he bites." Kate dialed the number without hesitation. "Hi, is this Alex?" she asked, her voice soft and polite. When the man on the other end confirmed it was indeed Alex, she continued, playing the part of Jennifer. She explained that she'd gotten his name from a conversation at her hair salon, where a woman had recommended him as a personal trainer. She threw in some personal details, saying she was 24, about 5 feet 5 inches, weighing around 130 pounds, but hoping to get down to 115. She even mentioned she was trying to get in better shape to feel more confident and happy with herself. Alex, apparently eager to take on new clients, said he had just had a slot open up because someone quit and would be happy to meet with her. Kate wrapped up the conversation by saying she'd stop by the gym soon to talk more about it. When she hung up, she turned to John and gave him a look that told him everything he needed to know. It was Alex. Emily had been calling Alex. John felt the weight of what he had discovered sink in deeper. Now he knew who Emily had been talking to all those Fridays, but there was still one question that remained. What exactly had been going on between them? With a sinking feeling in his gut, John realized he wasn't going to like the answer. John sat there, stunned by what Kate had just done. She had confirmed that the mysterious number belonged to Alex, the trainer from the gym. Even worse, she found out that Alex had a habit of hitting on the women he trained. And, to top it off, Alex had mentioned having an opening because one of his clients had recently quit. That dropout, John realized with a bitter laugh, was probably him. Emily must have already called Alex to fill him in and warn him to be cautious. As low as John felt in that moment, he couldn't help but find some humor in Kate's playful banter. He didn't know or care what Kate actually weighed. She looked incredible to him just the way she was. John smiled at her, shaking his head. "You're hilarious, Kate," he said, grinning. "And for the record, you're perfect the way you are. Better stay away from Alex. Nobody's got a more perfect body than you." Kate flashed him a gorgeous smile and teased back, "You're too kind, sir. And if you ask me, you're quite the hunk yourself. I can't understand why your wife would go looking elsewhere." John returned her smile, feeling his mood lift a bit. 2 years ago, "I wouldn't have been anyone's idea of a hunk," he admitted. "But that doesn't give her a free pass to cheat." He thanked Kate, not just for helping him out with the Alex situation, but for also giving his bruised ego a much-needed boost. With a heavy sigh, John decided it was time to head home. He expressed his appreciation once more and then left Grisham's, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. When he got home, it was late, so he didn't say much. He just crawled into bed, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. As he lay there, he glanced over at Emily, and a wave of disappointment washed over him. He had never felt so low in his life, and he had the sinking feeling that things were only going to get worse before they got better. Emily stirred slightly when he got into bed, whispering, "I love you, John." John couldn't muster a response beyond a grunt. He turned his back on her, trying to find some peace and sleep, though it didn't come easily. He lay awake for a long time, his mind racing. He thought he heard Emily let out a few quiet sobs, but it seemed like she had calmed down by the time he finally drifted off. In the morning, John woke up to find Emily spooned against him, her body pressed close to his back. She could tell he was aroused and made a move, sliding her hand over him, mumbling apologies for her harsh words and asking for some closeness. But John, despite the temptation, resisted. He knew he was vulnerable in that moment, but he also knew the boundaries he had set. "Not now," he told her firmly. "I need to get going this morning, and I already made it clear. Things aren't going back to how they were." He got up, showered, and left for work without looking back. Emily, left alone in the bed, muttered to herself, acknowledging that she deserved the fallout from her actions. The pain was hers to bear now. At work, John confided in his boss about what was going on at home, giving him a brief rundown of the situation. His boss listened, offering support and telling John to take whatever time he needed to sort things out. He even gave John the name of a reliable electronics distributor for surveillance equipment. Grateful for the understanding, John told his boss he'd take a few days off, Wednesday through Friday, to dig deeper into his suspicions. The boss, with a knowing smile, wished him good luck. John drove straight to the electronics distributor, and when he arrived, he found out that his boss had already called ahead, ensuring they'd give John everything he needed. Visual proof was going to be tough to get, but audio recording seemed manageable. He walked out with 3 top-notch bugs, each capable of recording for hours and transmitting the data from up to a few city blocks away. When John got home that evening, he was surprised to find Emily had gone all out. His favorite lasagna, garlic bread, and sweet green peas were waiting for him on the table. He thanked her for the meal, but excused himself to watch some TV. Emily, cautious and trying not to push him, cleaned up the kitchen and then joined him in the living room, keeping her distance. When bedtime came, she retreated to the bedroom, giving John the perfect chance to plant the first bug inside their home phone. The setup was quick, and soon enough, he had a complete record of all conversations on that line, no matter who was speaking. Bugging Emily's cell phone made John nervous, but he pushed the worry aside and did it anyway. It only took a few minutes. Now, he had both phones tapped, but there was still one more piece of the puzzle: Alex. John knew Emily could always use a different phone, like a payphone, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Alex's phone was crucial. He decided to take a risk and bug Alex's phone too. Remembering that Alex usually worked with a tall, well-built blonde woman on Wednesday mornings, John figured he could use that as his opportunity. The next morning, John headed to the gym. Sure enough, there was Alex, working with the blonde, his phone sitting on a towel about 10 feet away. It would be risky, but at this point, what did John have to lose? He slipped in unnoticed, grabbed Alex's phone, and tucked it into his pocket. He backed out of the gym quickly and ducked into the men's room. In a matter of seconds, he had the bug inserted and the phone back in his pocket. Now came the tricky part, getting the phone back to its spot on the towel without anyone noticing. When John returned to the gym floor, he saw that Alex was wrapping up his session with the blonde. Timing was everything. John carefully placed the phone back on the towel, his heart racing. He walked out of the gym feeling both triumphant and terrified of what he might uncover next. John stood there, realizing there was no way he'd make it back to Alex's towel unnoticed. Damn, he thought. How am I going to pull this off? After a few seconds, an idea hit him. He would try sliding the phone across the floor, hoping to get it close enough without Alex getting suspicious. It was risky, but at this point, John had nothing to lose. He went ahead and gave the phone a forceful shove. It skidded across the gym floor, making a small noise, but Alex, completely engrossed in his conversation with the blonde, didn't notice. The phone hit the towel hard and slid just under it. Perfect. John figured Alex wouldn't suspect a thing, and with a sigh of relief, he quickly left the gym. Not long after, at exactly 10:55 a.m., his cell phone rang. It was Emily, as usual, calling to check in before his meeting. She had no idea that John wasn't at work and had the rest of the week off. They talked for about 10 minutes, and John played along, pretending nothing was out of the ordinary. Once he was back in his car, John immediately began monitoring the bugs he'd planted. Before long, Alex's phone rang, and John listened closely as Alex answered. "Hey, Emily," Alex said casually. "You coming over to my place, like usual?" John's stomach churned as Emily responded, sounding cautious. "I don't know, Alex. John's getting suspicious, and we might need to cool it for a while. I don't want to get caught." Alex grumbled, clearly not happy about the idea. "I don't want to stop. You know that." John's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as Emily's voice came through again. "I know," she admitted, her voice softening. "The first time we were together, I knew I'd do anything to keep seeing you. That's why I cut John off, to have more time with you. But we need to be careful now." The betrayal hit John like a punch in the gut. Emily had been cutting him off for years, not because of his weight or health concerns, but because of Alex. She loved Alex's attention enough to sacrifice their marriage for it. Still, she wasn't ready to let go entirely. She promised Alex they might be able to meet up again in a few weeks, but for now, he'd have to settle for one of his other girlfriends. Emily even joked about not being jealous of Alex seeing other women. She suggested they might try meeting on the Fridays when John was out golfing, but she needed more time to think it over. John had heard enough. His blood boiled with anger, his body sick with the weight of what he had uncovered. Emily had been using the diet as an excuse to justify her affair with Alex for over 2.5 years, meeting him every Wednesday and sneaking in time on the Fridays John was golfing. They had been together over 100 times, and now John questioned whether this had been going on even before the diet. The sheer thought of it made him feel sick, but his anger was stronger than his heartbreak now. Revenge was all that was on his mind. Over the next 2 days, John planned his retaliation. He monitored the phone taps closely and discovered that Emily had a beautician appointment on Friday morning. On Thursday, she chatted with her hairdresser, Natalie, explaining that she wanted a new look to distract John from his suspicions. She even laughed about buying some sexy lingerie to throw him off. When Natalie asked about Alex, Emily nonchalantly said she might slow things down with him for now, but that it wasn't permanent. She laughed again, completely oblivious to the pain she was causing. John's heart broke with every word, but the more he listened, the more his anger consumed him. He buried the hurt deep inside, focusing solely on the plans he was making. On Saturday, just after lunch, the doorbell rang. Emily opened it to find Kate standing there, introducing herself as a friend of John's. "John told me I could come by and hang out by the pool," Kate said with a sly smile. Emily, taken aback, hesitated but eventually agreed, leading Kate to the pool area. It didn't take long before 2 more women showed up, Megan and Anna, both claiming John had invited them as well. Megan had worked with John for years, and Anna had served him at Grisham's. All 3 women were strikingly attractive, and as they settled in by the pool, Emily began to feel uneasy. The 3 women casually lounged in the sun, chatting and applying sunscreen. Before long, they were helping each other apply the lotion, making sure no spots were missed. Then, as if to further make Emily uncomfortable, they untied their bikini tops and lay back, enjoying the sun completely topless. Emily was furious, but knew she had to tread carefully. John had invited them, after all, and she was already on thin ice with him. Around 3:30 p.m., Kate approached Emily, sitting down beside her. With a knowing look, Kate introduced herself properly, revealing that she worked as a bartender at Grisham's. "I was there the night you gave John that ultimatum," Kate said casually. "He stopped by for a drink and told me everything." Emily's face turned pale as Kate continued. "I have to say, I think you made a big mistake. John's not the kind of guy to take something like that lightly. In fact, he's been suspicious ever since, and he's been investigating the whole situation." Emily's hands trembled slightly as she processed what Kate was saying. John's quiet behavior, his distance, all of it suddenly made sense. He knew. He knew everything. Kate leaned in closer, her voice soft but firm. "I wouldn't be surprised if John already has all the proof he needs." Kate's tone shifted as she delivered John's chilling warning to Emily. "John told me to let you know," she began, "that if he finds out about any infidelity, past or future, he plans to be intimate with me, Megan, and Anna for every single time you've cheated." Emily's eyes widened in shock, her mind racing for a response, but Kate wasn't finished. "Oh, and if you lie about anything, he'll do the same. One of us for every lie." Emily tried to stammer something in defense, but Kate cut her off. "You should know, Emily, we all find John attractive. We're more than happy to oblige him if it comes to that." Kate's words hung heavy in the air as she smiled knowingly. She already knew about Emily's affair with Alex. In her mind, it was only a matter of time before Emily's lies would catch up with her. Kate fully expected John to take up with her and the others once the truth came out. She could see it unfolding. Emily lying through her teeth to hide the affair, and John eventually satisfying his desire with each of them. Megan joined the conversation, sitting down next to Kate with a smirk. "I've known John for years," she said. "Even when he gained weight, he was still the sweetest guy. Honestly, I've always had a crush on him. Now that he's lost all that weight, he could have me whenever he wants." Anna chimed in from the side, her eyes gleaming. "I've been watching Emily and John for a while," she admitted. "I saw the love John had for you, Emily. But the more I watched, the more I wanted to be in your shoes. He's such a kind man, and seeing how hard he worked to make you happy, I've dreamed about being with a man like that." Anna glanced at Emily, who was growing more uncomfortable by the second. "And now, After losing all that weight? John's turned into quite the hunk. I'd love a chance to be with him. Just then, at exactly 4 p.m., John stepped onto the pool deck. He took a quick glance around, noting the women's sun-kissed skin. Well, looks like everyone's getting a good tan, he said with a playful grin. His eyes settled on Emily, who was sitting there tight-lipped, visibly upset by the day's events. Emily, he teased, why don't you join in? Everyone's having fun. Why haven't you taken your top off yet? His words dripped with sarcasm, knowing full well the kind of tension simmering beneath the surface. Emily, clearly rattled by the unfolding situation, reluctantly complied, though she was far from comfortable. John's playful demeanor soon gave way to something much darker as he turned toward her and spoke in a more serious tone. I've got a couple of questions for you, he said, his voice low, and I need you to be honest. Emily shifted uneasily in her seat. Okay, she whispered. Have you cheated on me during our marriage? John asked bluntly. No, Emily said, shaking her head. I would never do that. John's eyes narrowed as he pressed further. What about Alex? From the gym? Emily's heart raced as she tried to keep her composure. Alex? Where is this coming from, John? No, I haven't cheated. John wasn't buying it. He leaned in closer, his voice steely. I know about your meetings with him on Wednesdays. And I know about the Fridays when I'm out golfing. Are you going to keep lying to me? Emily's shock grew as she realized just how much John knew. She had no idea he had been piecing it all together, but she clung to her denial, hoping he didn't have concrete proof. John, I don't know what you're talking about, she insisted, feigning confusion. Kate, Megan, and Anna sat there, their expressions smug, knowing that the truth was about to unravel. John took a deep breath, holding up the phone logs he had gathered. I have the call records, he said, from our landline and your cell. I've been tracking your calls to Alex. Every Wednesday, every Friday. You really expect me to believe this is all innocent? He turned to Kate, who dialed Alex's number right in front of Emily. The phone rang, and when Alex answered, it was undeniable. The confirmation was clear, and Emily's face drained of color. I may not have photos of you two together, John continued, his voice filled with bitterness, but I don't need them. I know what those calls are about. Emily's world crumbled as she realized the depth of John's knowledge. There was no escaping the consequences now. She opened her mouth to respond, but John cut her off before she could speak. Don't bother, he said, his voice full of hurt and disgust. Nothing you say can convince me otherwise. John's gaze softened for a brief moment. I loved you, Emily, but right now, I feel nothing but anger, disgust, and pain, and I don't think I'll ever be able to get past it. He then gestured toward the women sitting nearby. Megan, Anna, Kate, he said, introducing them. Megan's been a work colleague for years. She's beautiful and sweet, and I know she's had a crush on me for a long time, but I stayed faithful to you, Emily, out of respect for our marriage. Megan smiled at John, their shared history shining in her eyes. I've always admired you, John, she said softly, and I still do. John turned to Anna. Anna's been serving us at Grisham's for a while now. She's seen what we had, or at least what I thought we had. She's fantasized about being in your place, Emily. And who could blame her? I've done everything I could to make you happy. Anna blushed slightly, but she didn't deny it. It's true, John. I've admired you for so long. Finally, John looked at Kate. And Kate? She's the one who helped me get to the bottom of all this. She listened to me when I was at my lowest, when I didn't know what to believe anymore. She's been more of a friend to me than I could have imagined. Kate's smile was knowing. John, you deserve better, she said softly. We all know that. By now, Emily was teetering on the edge of an emotional breakdown. Her face was wet with tears, and her breathing had become shallow and erratic. She could barely process what was happening. The reality of her betrayal and the consequences she now faced weighed heavily on her, and there was no escape from the judgment she was about to face. Despite wanting to say something, Emily remained silent, unable to form the words that might change the inevitable. John, having noticed the clear interest from Kate, Megan, and Anna, acknowledged that he was looking forward to indulging in new experiences with them, exploring every aspect of sensuality they had to offer. But he also made something clear. He wasn't willing to be unfaithful while still married to Emily. His loyalty, even now, was too strong. The only way forward, he said, was to end their marriage. Kate, with a practiced professionalism, reached into her bag and produced a set of divorce papers. "I also serve papers," she said calmly, placing them on the table in front of Emily. The irony of the bartender being a process server hit Emily like a sledgehammer, and she broke down in tears as the weight of the moment became too much to bear. Through her sobs, Emily began pleading. "John, please," she choked out. "I love you. I'm so sorry. Can't we fix this? Can't we start over?" John stood firm, his voice cold and distant. "You say you love me, but your actions tell a different story. This isn't just about a mistake here or there, Emily. You've been meeting Alex for years. This happened over 100 times. How can I believe you love me when you've treated me like this?" The court hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. After that, John planned to begin his new relationships with the 3 women. "Maybe," he said, almost as if talking to himself, "maybe indulging with them will help me understand what you found with Alex. Maybe it'll give me the kind of satisfaction you seem to get from betraying me." John glanced at the 3 women, signaling that it was time for them to go. "I'll be in touch," he said, offering a faint smile as they gathered their things and left, one by one. Once they were gone, John headed into the house, grabbing a few essentials to take with him to a hotel for the next few days. He didn't plan to be there long. By Friday, either he or Emily would be moving out for good. Emily, still seated by the pool, was now crying quietly. Her mind was a haze of emotions: guilt, regret, fear, and she couldn't find the words to stop the devastation that was swallowing her whole. When John reappeared, suitcases in hand, she wasn't sure what else he had to say, but she braced herself for more. John, his face a mix of anger and satisfaction, reminded her of the consequences he'd warned about for her lover, Alex. "You should know," John began. "When you canceled on Alex yesterday, he decided to make his move on that blonde coworker he was always warming up with. You know, the one he stretched with every Wednesday before your little meetups." Emily didn't respond, but John continued, his voice growing colder. "Turns out that blonde? Her name's Lisa DeSantis. Ring a bell? She's married to Vincent DeSantis." At the mention of Vincent's name, Emily's face paled. John gave a dark smile. Vincent didn't take too kindly to Alex screwing around with his wife. He and a couple of his guys paid Alex a visit, and let's just say, Alex won't be the same for a long time. His face is a wreck, he's missing most of his teeth, and he's got a couple of broken ribs. Vincent was nice enough to let me take a swing at Alex too. One good shot to the groin. I don't think Alex is going to be making any more hot seed anytime soon. Hell, he may never be able to have sex again. John's eyes bore into Emily's, his satisfaction clear. "But don't worry, I wasn't involved. I've got an alibi. Friday's my golf day, remember? I was with my brother and the guys all day. Convenient, huh?" The devastation on Emily's face was palpable, but John wasn't finished. "Enjoy your life, Emily," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'll see you in court next Friday." And with that, John turned and walked away, leaving Emily alone with her guilt and shame. She stayed by the pool for what felt like hours, crying softly until she couldn't cry anymore. After some time, she finally gathered the strength to get up, pack a bag, and leave for her mother's house. The divorce process dragged on for 7 long months. Emily fell into a deep depression, devastated by the loss of her marriage and the weight of her mistakes. She had underestimated the damage she'd caused, and now she was paying the price. As for John, contrary to what he had suggested about Kate, Megan, and Anna, he had no intention of pursuing those relationships. In the end, the thought of using them to heal his pain seemed hollow. Instead, he found solace in a simpler kind of love. He adopted 2 golden retrievers, whose unconditional affection gave him the peace he had been searching for. Through them, he discovered the kind of true, unconditional love that he had once believed he'd had with Emily. And so, while Emily's life unraveled, John rebuilt his, finding comfort in companionship that expected nothing in return. His journey of heartbreak, betrayal, and revenge ultimately led him back to something real, something pure. He had finally found the love and loyalty that had eluded him for so long.